Welcome back everyone. As we move towards the final session of the day, we will be discussing about the critical minerals for India's clean energy transition. As India advances its energy transition efforts and aims to rely on domestic manufacturing for various technologies, the demand for critical minerals is set to rise significantly across multiple sectors. To support this, India must strengthen its mineral supply chains, which are currently at risk due to factors like domestic scarcity, high dependence on external supply chain beyond the country's control, and limitations in domestic policy and regulatory capacities. This panel will be addressing the significant challenges facing India's critical mineral supply and explore potential solutions in alignment with country's energy transition objective. Now like to call all the panelists on stage as well as the moderator. So, Mr. Manu Mathai will be moderating the session, and I'll start calling the panelists and I'll give their introduction one by one. We have with us Dr. Rajesh Chadda. He is the Senior Fellow at Center for Social and Economic Progress. He was formerly a professor and research director at National Council of Applied Economic Research, and former to that, an associate professor of economics at Hindu College. Sir, can you please get on the stage? Our next panelist, Professor Sharon Ray, is an economist. He is a visiting professor at Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations. She specializes in industry and international trade issues and has published on issues on energy and climate change. Welcome, ma'am. We have with us Dr. Kapil Narula. Mr. Narula is Breakthrough Agenda Senior Analyst at the Climate Champions team and is supporting the United Nations Climate Change High Level Champions for Ambitious Action on Climate Change. Kapil has over 2 decades of versatile work experience in international organizations, universities, government, and think tanks. Next in the panel, we have Mr. Praveen Kumar from WRI-India. Praveen is a Senior Program Manager of Electric Mobility at WRI-India. Currently, he is associated with projects related to electric vehicle ecosystem. He has previously worked at IISc Bangalore. We also have Dr. Niharika Tegotra from WRI-India. She's a Senior Research Specialist at the Energy Program. Before joining WRI, she was working as a consultant at Ministry of External Affairs. She was also the NBR Asia Edge Fellow for the year 2021-2022. And I'll also introduce our moderator. Moderating this session is Dr. Manu Mathai. Dr. Manu is the Head of Research at the Data and Innovation at WRI India. Prior to joining WRI, Manu was an Associate Professor in the School of Development at Azim Premji University. I would request Dr. Manu to lead the session. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming back after tea. I think we've moved progressively we started with cities in the morning, then we spoke about states, and I think this conversation will speak at the national and the international level. So, and that means there are some couple of newer dynamics that we'll spend time talking about. And broadly, two big topics that I suppose we want to understand is the whole question around supply chains of critical minerals. And the second big kind of question, and unknown, I suppose, is the fact that critical minerals are, after all, mining. And mining is a very old industry, and it's generally not a very pretty industry, right? So there are those kind of complexities as well that we need to take into consideration, right? But what it shares with the other sessions is that this is an extremely dynamic space. It's very new, it's evolving very rapidly, given the ambitions that we have around clean energy, right? So the speed of change, the international type of linkages, all of this creates a certain animal that we're still grappling to get our hands around, right? And hopefully this conversation with this eminent panel will help us make some useful steps in that direction. So maybe I thought I'll just start by inviting Dr. Chadda to tell us a little bit about what critical minerals are. And very interestingly, how do we actually know what critical minerals are, right? I mean, they're minerals after all, and the government of India has identified certain minerals, but please tell us a little bit about what they are and how we come to know what they are.
Am I on? Thank you very much for inviting me to this important session of the day, and that is critical minerals. The way it started happening with Our thought process was, I was working on supply chains way back during the COVID days of 2000, work from home, and I have my the then co-author working with me, Ganesh Sivamani, and later Karthik Bansal also joined in the new edition. So we've been thinking about the critical minerals. We published a paper sometime in 2021, and then came out with a 2023 update in April 2023, which was taken seriously by the Ministry of Mines, and they came out with a came out with a list later. And I think I'll be giving some time to part of my work has been thanks Niharika, you have explained certain things about critical minerals already. So whatever I will be speaking is on the basis of the research that has been conducted at the Center for Social and Economic Progress, formerly Brookings India, which got transformed to CSEP, Center for Social and Economic Progress. As Niharika pointed out, I think the critical minerals are the resources. They are minerals, as Manu said. They are minerals after all. And they have two specific features that we look at when we try to measure the criticality. One is the economic importance and by the way, different countries have adopted different ways of defining critical minerals. One of the unique things, or two unique things in all the estimates, are the economic importance in measured in some way, and the supply risks attached to each of the minerals. So essentially, they are inputs that go into the production process and whose supply disruptions are likely to stop the production of that particular uh, uh, product for which they are being imported or produced. And non availability and price affordability are also two very important factors that have already been alluded to. I am not going into that. The way we measure the criticality of the minerals, we adopted one of the approaches that EU has been adopting, and we also are would like to acknowledge the work that CEW has done in 2016. After that, there was a break, and we started doing it in 2020. So, thanks to CEW, if there are some people here from CEW, we read their paper and took it forward. So, what is economic importance? I think we measured economic, and this is quite a technical, involved equation based system, which you can refer to our papers. Simply go to CSEP Minerals, you will get all our publications. So, first of all, it is important to see the disruption potential. How much of the GVA manufacturing will get impacted if that mineral is not available? The second is substitutability, that is the cost and performance of the substitute of each end use application. We introduced a unique new feature called GVA multiplier coefficients by working backward and forward linkages, that how much would be the impact in a multiplier way. And an important thing that also is to be seen, cross cutting copper versus concentrated lithium mineral, because lithium is used in one or two technologies, copper is everywhere. Supply risk obviously is based on, as Niharika said, Congo extraction of cobalt, lithium Australia goes to China for processing, and REs, rare earth elements, in China. But I think one thing important that is missed is sometimes the ownership. Who owns the companies? It's not which country it is extracted in, but also is important which uh, companies are owning the resources. Supply risks are already alluded, but I think I will refer to the concentration of minerals, governance index, which we have used, like Congo is poor on governance index, bottleneck analysis, which means which stage is more bottleneck, whether it is extraction versus the processing, and end use recycling and substitutability. Finally, I have a minute on the Ministry of Mines, where we presented our paper in April. We had presented earlier also. They have come up with a list of 30 minerals. If you see the page 32 of the Ministry of Mines report, they have come up with a list of 30 minerals, which is slightly less than the number they have done, because they put rare earth elements, which are 17, as one member, as one, and they also put PGE, platinum group elements, as one, which are actually six. So the total goes up to more than 50. So they've done it in three stages, using CEW and CSEP results, and then discussing it with various ministries, including power, fertilizers, atomic, DST, pharmaceuticals, and come up with a list of these 30 critical minerals. And they still are uh, grappling with the formula we have used, and they will set up a committee to do the needful. Last point, uh, wind, for example, copper, zinc, rare earths, manganese, solar, silicon, gallium, germanium, and batteries, cobalt and lithium. So I think the reports are there. You can always refer to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chadda. And I think I like the fact that you mentioned different countries come up with slightly different lists based on their assessments of risk and so forth, right? And
They are doing it dynamically every 2 to 3 years, which we have suggested, and we will ourselves be doing. And I think the ministry has taken, because they have kind of acknowledged our work.
I think that's a very important thing to kind of recognize, that this is a continues to be a moving target, right? And so maybe I'll bring in Dr. Kumar here, and Praveen, if you could just talk a little bit about what kind of scaling we are expecting to see, both globally and in India, right? We've heard about electric vehicle targets and all sorts of things. Everything is looking like the graphs are looking like this. So how does that translate into demand for
Thank
these?
you, Dr. Manu. And already Dr. Rajesh explained about how we define the criticality. And in this year, in June, Ministry of Mines has released the list of critical minerals for India, and they have included 30 minerals in that. Although they have included all rare earth as one unit, but we know that only few rare earths are comes under the critical list. So as far as the technology is concerned, if we just see in this transition from fossil fuel based technologies to low carbon technologies, we are going to expect a significant jump in the mineral requirement, because these technologies are mineral intensive. And if we look into the trend in last decade, the production of certain minerals has increased in the range of 36% to 200%. And if this, with the current projections and the technology trend continues, we are going to face the shortage of some of the critical minerals in the coming years. And for example, if we take the lithium, so some of the studies suggest that we may face a shortage of 1.1 million tons by 2035. And similarly, if we just go and see each technology, there is a certain minerals that we may face shortage in the coming years. But there is another aspect that we need to look into. What is happening, that as Dr. Rajesh also mentioned, that technology in these low carbons are undergoing improvement, and the innovation is going on. And also efforts are going on to explore the alternative technology. So that will be having a direct impact on the assessment of the critical mineral requirements. But we need to monitor this continuously, that how the technology trend is evolving. For example, if we just take the example of lithium battery, so currently LFP and NMC battery, LFP and NMC variants are leading the market, and R&D efforts are going on to reduce the cobalt content in the NMC variants, and efforts are towards the development of cobalt free lithium variants. And similarly, we can see the development on the sodium ion battery technology. And various analysis suggest that by 2030 we may see good penetration from the sodium ion technology. But these all are projections, and we have to see how much disruptive potential these technologies are having, and this will be having the impact on the all the projections what we do for the mineral requirement. Another aspect is there the circularity, because when we are talking about the ramping up the mining to meet the mineral requirement, this mining, increasing the mining activity is going to have some impact on the environment, and there will be other various issues will be associated with that. So one of the important thing is they are integrating the circularity into these low carbon technologies. And when we say the circularity, so some of the analysis suggest that if we integrate this circularity effectively in the supply chain of low carbon technology, we'll be able to reduce the primary mining requirement of certain critical minerals. If I take an example of lithium battery, so if we have a good recycling, good integration of circularity of lithium batteries from the EV sector and the other applications, we'll be able to reduce the primary mining requirement for this cobalt and nickel by 35% almost, and for nickel by 25% by 2040. So this is a very important aspect that we need to look into. Similarly, in case of rare earth, these are rare earth magnets are used in the EV motors and the wind turbine motors, and this rare earth magnet require the certain critical minerals from the rare earth, like neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium is required in that. And the efforts are going on how we reduce the content of some of this critical rare earths from the these motors, and researchers are also trying toward developing the rare earth free magnet, so that we can reduce this requirement of this certain critical minerals in the, because this all these minings will be having some impact on the environment, then the water, then the energy, and these all mining separation of the rare earths are very energy intensive. And right now most of the grids are dominated by the thermal power plants. So the conversation we see in case of electric vehicle, that we are shifting emission from city to some other place by using the electric vehicle, although that is not completely true, because you have to see all the aspects, and the efficiency of the electric vehicles need to be taken into account while when you are commenting on the emission aspect. So these are the things, like as Dr. Rajesh mentioned, that we need to look into the technology trend, how is evolving, and then how the material requirement is changing. Because we have seen in the past the fluctuation in the cost of the certain minerals related to battery, and there are the various regions responsible for that, not only the demand, because these minerals are geographically concentrated in the few areas. As far as India is concerned, if I just take an example of India, we have electric EV market in India is dominated by electric two-wheeler and electric three-wheeler. And in this area, we can see the transition from lead acid battery to lithium batteries. And in coming year, we expect a lot of focus are there on the diversification of battery technology in this small vehicle segment. So this is going to change the kind of mineral requirement will be there for the EV sector in India. So, and in the case of lithium battery, we can see LFP and NMC variants are dominating the market, and some development is there around the LMO and the LTO variant of the lithium batteries. So this kind of development is happening in India. So what I see in this one, mapping the technology landscape in each low carbon technology, like whether it's solar, whether it's wind or electric vehicle, is very important, and country specific assessment of critical mineral requirements based on the technology trend need to be done. And the challenges I will, if you want me to highlight the challenges associated with the supply chain, yeah. So I can. I mean,
please do just hint it. We
okay.
will come back to you in the next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. And so, in addition to the point about trends and understanding, keeping a track of these projections, I think the circularity point is very well taken, and that's something you can build in right in the beginning. Right, you won't have right path dependencies built into the system. Right. So, okay. Thanks, Dr. Kumar. If I can just move along now to Dr. Ray, Professor Ray. Sorry. So these, I think the phrase value chains have come up a couple of times. So if you can just characterize what the current value chains are and what the emerging ones are, right? And there's also, obviously, China is a big word in that context, but I'm guessing there are other countries too. And perhaps I think Dr. Chadha mentioned, it's not just country but also ownership. So if you can just speak a little to that topic, please. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Is this audible? Yeah, thank you. I think 2 points that have been already mentioned are very critical in this whole discussion. The first is, of course, that things are changing very rapidly. So, for example, the demand for lithium shot up because most countries started their electric vehicle transition. But the other factor that is very important in this case is geopolitics. And geopolitics is something that it's there in other cases also. I mean, geopolitics is there in oil as well, for example. But we are talking about 30 different minerals, and the geopolitics of each would be very different. And again, this speaks to the point that Dr. Kumar was referring to, that it is not necessary that the country which has the reserves is actually processing it. They may be mining it, but then they are not processing it. And so the control of the value chain is actually, a large part of it actually rests with countries which do not have the reserves. And the typical case in point, of course, is China, which is dominating so many of these chains. From the point of view of India, given that the government has identified 30 critical minerals, I think the most important thing to note is that, I mean, the copper stands out, in fact, because the amount of copper that we are now importing is, it's a huge amount compared to, say, the amount that we are importing for importing lithium or nickel or cobalt, for that matter. I mean, of course, the thing is that you would need all the three. But India, in fact, used to be a copper exporter, and we've now turned into a net copper importer. So that is a very critical. So basically, the thing is that things will change. Things are very dynamic. Things will change. The geopolitics will change, and that will depend, and that will define, who will control the supply chain, who will start doing the refining and the processing. So from the point of view of India, I think what we need to focus is on, as Dr. Chadda also mentioned, that this we have to look at the criticality. We have to revisit it every 2-3 years, taking into account all of these things, that how the geopolitics is changing, how the price conditions are changing, how the supply or reserves are changing. There have been some cases which have been mentioned, that Chile is, for example, a very Chile and Peru, they are good sources of certain minerals, but they are facing domestic problems or water related problems in mining. So all of those things have to also, and since if they change, entire value chain will change. And as technology advances, maybe alternatives can be found. Again, the case in point, sodium batteries, or, I mean, a substitute for lithium ion, etc. So the most important thing then to note is that we keep revising and re-looking at this, and partnerships, of course, could become. Sorry. And partnerships could be very important in attaining some of these objectives. So I'll stop here now, and maybe we can come back.
Thank you, Professor Ray. And maybe now, if I might just invite, he's online. Okay, Dr. Narula. Just to maybe we can dig into China a little bit and the risk of, I guess, the weaponization potential and so forth, right? I mean, Professor Ray just mentioned that geopolitics will change, and I guess the importance of critical minerals will also evolve. But as we stand now, what realistically is the risk of weaponization, and what should policymakers, etc., keep in mind presently? Right. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Manu, and also to WRI Good afternoon from Dubai. And also thank you to my esteemed panelists, who have laid down the foundation. Uh, Moving on to the specific question, continuing with Dr. Ray's insights into China. China stands out, both in energy production as well as in the critical minerals value chain. And it has a dominant position not only in mining but also in midstream and downstream issues. The midstream, I would like to focus on pre-processing and processing of minerals, which would include, purification, refining, and processing of all these minerals. And it imports a lot of raw materials in terms of minerals, and they find their way into China for processing and pre-processing. And it's the concentration of the refining industry is up to 90 to 95% for certain minerals in China. So clearly they control the entire value chain, and both in intermediate and advanced processing, and then also in the downstream production of advanced production, cell production, for example, as well as assembly of modules and so on. So clearly, there's no way out at the moment, and the world is clearly recognizing this concentration of value chains in China. And therefore, they have come up, countries like the US, the EU, they have come up with diversifying these value chains. In terms of potential weaponization of China's dominant position, I think critical minerals have been used as a geopolitical tool for leveraging their positions throughout. And there were certain examples earlier, but more recently, from 1st August of this year, China limited the export of gallium and germanium. And these are essentially required for military technologies. Although they state that it was in response to the ban of the US on AI chips and manufacturing equipment, but that's the kind of wars which can go on based on critical minerals. And very recently, not even a month ago, on 20th October, China announced that with effect from December, foreign companies will need special export license for battery grade graphite. And China controls 90% of these value chains. So clearly we see weaponization of the critical minerals value chain, and using it as a geopolitical tool is a ploy which is being actively used, not only by China, but also by other countries to their benefit. And the next question then becomes is how should India guard and secure its mineral supply chains? And because all of this has an impact on sudden spikes in the prices, it may not be an actual ban of material, but if you want special export licenses, it could take as long as 12 to 18 months, depending on how you want to process these licenses. But I think along with other countries such as the US and the EU, India should look at onshoring and friendshoring of value chains inside the own country. And that is a trend which we see across different countries. There have also been some steps taken, especially, for example, by Japan, on having some emergency stockpiles of minerals, and similar to emergency reserves for oil, and that I am not sure if that's on the cards for India, but definitely some countries are looking at it. Moving on from intermediate and a midterm to a long-term perspective, I think a lot of focus needs to be given on developing and adopting a critical mineral strategy for India. And all the G7 countries, including the EU, have, and many other countries have a critical mineral strategy. I think the first step towards that direction has already been made by identification of these critical mineral list. But moving on from there, I think a roadmap for critical minerals should be the next step. Uh, and of course, in the long run, I think exploration needs to be given much more attention. And after exploration, there is a time lag of about 10 to 15 years to develop a mine and its infrastructure, including all the refining and intermediate pre-processing capabilities. I think that also needs to be on the card, and all of it requires long-term investments, including support from the industry. And coming on to the last aspect of this question, as to the role of think tanks and organization like the WRI. And it's evident that research and analysis is a part of the entire process. The government has limited capacity in this, and think tanks like the WRI, CSEP, CEW have been doing some great work, including on demand estimation and developing this critical mineral list. And following it up with these facilitating dialogues, where it's not only important that that researchers come together, but also government and critically the industry and the funders for this industry. So private industry has to step up in and be involved in this entire process. And finally, I would like to point out that think tanks play a vital role in allowing analysis of policy options as well as impacts, because all impacts are not positive. There are several impacts which are negative in terms of, for example, ESG issues. And there, I think India and think tanks like the WRI need to play a vital role. Last point I wanted to make is on Niharika's presentation on that, and the comment which was made that India's position is sort of semi-peripheral in the critical mineral global landscape, and it's moving to the center. I think India is far away from moving to the center. It needs to pull up its socks and move fast, because otherwise the entire critical minerals value chain, which is currently dominated by China, and inroads are being made by US and EU. I think we are at a risk of getting left behind. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Narula. So on that point about moving to the center, presumably that means control higher, I mean, I guess greater influence over the value chain. Is that how you would understand moving to the center, or some other way?
No, exactly. So India should be a big player in critical minerals. For example, and I'll give you one example, that recycling, which was pointed out, is going to be a big industry. And like we move to the center of oil refining, can we have the largest urban mining and recycling capability in the world? I think then India would look at moving into the center and controlling some of these value chains.
Great, thank you. Maybe I will now move to the kind of the second topic here, right, which is the impacts, the environmental impacts, so to speak, of mining. And maybe I'll focus this question to Dr. Chadda. How do we kind of, I mean, we are talking about green energy transition and so on and so forth, but how do we ensure that this green transition, which still depends on extraction heavily, right? How do we avoid the mistakes, I suppose, of the fossil fuel era, right? Not an easy thing to do, but yeah, that's the question.
Thank you. I think it is more difficult than I can imagine any other question is. But it is important that you have set the tone to how to move forward. First of all, let us be mindful that we are yet to be there on the critical mineral extraction list. And something that has been spoken on as tangential is that we have uh, not been able to maximize or optimize our exploration efforts. And I won't go into details because that needs a full session, that we have not done enough. So the question that how would we do, and second thing before I start my set of comments, the second thing is that I hear on some platforms, why do you worry? India can become a part of global value chains, and I have been doing international trade all my life, by the way. So why do you worry? You know, trade, we can always trade with other countries and our supplies. But this is not the story of 5 years or 10 years that we can sign an FTA and sit comfortably thinking that all the critical minerals will be ours on a call. Sorry, that is not going to happen. And to say that we'll keep uh, our backyard clean, let others make it dirty, and but that can be a story for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years. It's beyond my lifetime. It is 2070. So nobody is going to give assurance to India that we will supply all the critical minerals to you. So many of you will live to see that net zero. So I am very worried about that we don't have even started the effort, and some find of lithium somewhere maybe 30 years ago which has come to light now, which will take its own sweet time of 7 to 8 years to fructify, and then start worrying about how, whether we should dirty our backyard or not. So these are my initial comments. My most important thought process on this is that I do understand, and please look at our background paper that we wrote sometime in 2019 or 2020 when we were transforming from Brookings to CSEP. Ganesh wrote with me saying that what agriculture is to food self sufficiency, mining is to manufacturing self sufficiency. And if we say that we'll manufacture, we'll make in India, no, but no to mining is not done, cannot be possible. Secondly, from the beginning, since we started this work program, we have been looking at the normative aspects. So there are about 50 plus uploads on our of our research work on the CSEP Minerals website, where we have given very serious consideration to externalities. So I'm not now speaking from my paper, which I discussed about the criticality of minerals, but a lot other work that we have done in this area, and I'll take about 3 to 4 minutes, permissible to me. Okay, so to become globally competitive and self-reliant sustainable mining hub, India must ensure mineral security for the 21st century. That means we have to be very careful, provide intergenerational optimum resources to the state's exchequers, and adequate returns to the mining companies. Rely on the state of the art technology and create additional jobs, while, now I underline my while ensuring environmental sustainability and welfare of the affected communities. A backgrounder written in January 2020. So, from the beginning, we have been mindful of the externalities and how to take care, and what should be done to take care. Uh, the mining sector has often been related to the negative externalities, which in our works we have been dealing with. I'll come to two or three of them. There have been some efforts towards sustainable mining practices in India. We still have a long way to go. So now I'm on the other side. So how we define our work program is positive economics. That is, companies should be given, mining companies should be given the best chance to operate at international comparable standards. But at the same time, we should be mindful of the communities and, of course, the environmental issues. Over the past decade, India's mining sector, including the non fuel mineral sector, has been marred by countless controversies, from violation and poor implementation of regulatory requirements pertaining to environmental protection and community rights to over extraction and illegal sale of ores, etc. The need of the hour, therefore, is a streamlined clearance and permitting mechanism along with strong institutions that will protect interest of the environment and the affected communities. I am quoting from two of our papers. One is on regulatory reform, jurisprudence and ESG, and the other is the working paper on the issues related to environment and uh, standards and governance. Mineral rich areas should be prepared for a smooth transition to begin mining activities by carefully integrating all the pillars: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, and sustainable development goals. Again, quoting from our work on sustainable mining conflicts and sustainable development 2021. Simplification of the post lease clearance mechanism, which needs immediate attention, that it takes a lot of time after the lease has been granted. It must be taken into account. After 2015 MMDR reform, the government set up something called District Mineral Foundation Funds, and later integrated this with again, this is a paper that you can download, integrated it with the PMKKKY, that is Prime Minister Pradhan Mantri Khanij Kshetra Kalyan Yojana. According to this, the mining companies will pay a part of the royalty, over and above the royalty, 30% for the earlier ones and 10% for the post 2015, which will be used for the welfare of the communities and environmental protection. However, the paper that is published in January 2022 clearly shows that all that was supposed to happen under the District Mineral Foundation Fund welfare schemes actually has not happened. And one of the most distressing thing is that it was said that the local communities' participation will be in a big way, which probably has not happened. And many of the DMF fund has much of the DMF fund, instead of going to environment, drinking water, preservation of pollution control, healthcare, etc., has gone into road building or some other works. Our research suggests that currently DMF is being treated as any other development or infrastructure fund, with spending on other priority areas rather than the 6 priority areas that were defined. Now, how can we see the real time assessment? I think some of you might know that 2 years ago we published a paper on 24 districts of Jharkhand, which was presented in Jharkhand by PhD Chamber of Commerce Knowledge Partner, which takes account of how the districts are performing on 5 different pillars. And I name the pillars: mining potential and performance, socio-economic status, policy and governance, infrastructure, environment. On these 5 pillars, we index, and we call it Sustainable Mining Attractiveness Index, SMI, Jharkhand. Incidentally, a month ago, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, we have published yet another report. This is the second edition for 323 districts of 12 mining states. How does this Sustainable Mining Attractiveness Index looks like? Surprisingly, some of the very well performing on the mining potential and performance are poor performers on policy and governance and infrastructure. Lastly, one important thing, which is a message for all the mining companies in India. Two things, that Canada publishes something called a Fraser Index. Fraser Index tells us the mining attractiveness of a particular mining jurisdiction. Till 5 years ago, India used to be somewhere in the list. That's a different issue, that it used to be 90th on the 100 or 97th on the 102. But 5 years ago, we have lost even out of Fraser Index, and they no more publish the mining attractiveness of India. One. Two, that none of the mining companies is a member of International Council on Mining and Metals, ICMM, which has set out 10 ESG principles for mining companies globally, and many of the global companies are there. So it is a bit surprising that none of the Indian mining companies has been able to meet the standards that ICMM said, that is International Council on Mining and Metals, set for environment and social governance, etc. It is essential that the domestic companies adopt ESG, and that's the answer to, it has to be. We are not saying that the critical minerals can be extracted and processed whichever way you want to. You have to meet with international standards, and surprised that none of the Indian companies is a member there. Finally, I think the issue of worrying about mining abundance, etc., when our mining activity in India is less than 1% of GDP compared to 5 to 7% in many other mining rich countries, we may wish it off saying that, oh, we don't mine. But anyway, that I have already discussed. And finally, India can attain resilience and critical mineral supply chains by owning extraction and processing facilities abroad, but at the same time, consider cleaner options to join the supply chains at various stages. So, we are not saying that we start extracting today, but at least we should be joining the mining chains at some value of it, whether we do it in India or own the mineral asset extraction or processing elsewhere. After all, China did not reach the heights. They were working hard when the other countries were sleeping. So I don't want to quote from a very famous line. They were working hard, mining hard, and they have reached the status which they have today, even defying the US aircraft planes, because each of them needs huge amounts of critical minerals from China.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind of reality check, I suppose, and also a certain set of proposals to take this forward. But I think the take home message is that the green energy transition isn't quite green yet or guaranteed to be green yet, right? So that's a big kind of red flag for all of us to keep in mind. I'll come to you now, Dr. Gotra, and then Professor Ray. Hearing everything that you've heard, Harika, how would you think of, and from the point of view WRI's research, right? What kinds of frameworks would be useful to consider to kind of take all of these factors into consideration? Yeah. Analytical frameworks, right?
Yes. Thanks, Manu. I think for the purpose of this paper, we started off with that traditional framework that we use for certain resources, which is the core periphery framework, where we look at countries that have certain resources and countries that don't have certain resources, and then sort of moving from there on to analyze how that framework works for critical minerals. And through this paper, we came to the conclusion that the core periphery framework, at least for the purpose of critical minerals, doesn't work, because China stands as an anomaly. It's not a developed country, but it's an advanced economy which has monopolized the processing and production for most of these mineral resources, leaving your highly advanced and developed countries sort of at the periphery of the whole critical mineral economy. And taking it on from there, now what kind of analytical framework would actually work? So from an international point of view, I think we have to look at the critical mineral economy from a strategic or a geopolitical perspective, to try and understand, like Professor Ray pointed out and Dr. Narula also pointed out, who controls the value chains. And I think once we assess that, which country exactly controls the value chains, how are the value chains developing, and what are sort of the alternatives for some of the developed and the developing economies in terms of, playing that larger role in the critical mineral ecosystem. So I think that is one framework. But when it comes down to basically on ground reality, I think one framework that we really need to adhere to, and one framework that could be used to sort of analyze how this whole critical mineral economy works on ground is going to be your equity framework, looking at it from a just transition lens in terms of how mining of a particular mineral in a particular place affects the local communities, how it impacts the environment, and what are some sort of the local challenges that this mining of a particular mineral creates. This is especially important for India, considering that now there is this policy rush to, uh, you know, uh, explore the mineral reserves that we have and sort of convert them into commercially scalable resources. So I think these are the two aspects that look at both the international international political economy of critical minerals, and also as well as a domestic political economy of these minerals.
Thank you. And if I may also just ask Professor Ray to chime in on this question about analytical frameworks that you think would be suitable.
Right. So the most important thing for India is, of course, as Dr. Narula mentioned, that we need to have, firstly, what is our strategy? And the strategy has to be, it has to be, there's to be a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy, because some of these things will take time. We need to do a mapping of where the reserves are, which countries have the reserves, and where are they being processed, not only the reserves, but where they are being processed and refined. And then we, of course, enter into partnerships with countries. And there is some partnerships that we have already entered. There are some consortiums led by US. The EU is also talking about some partnerships. Now, the most important point to remember in all of this is that every country is now trying to get access to these minerals, and it has become such an important thing for so many countries. So countries are in fact competing with each other. And I think one of the things that we would also need to think about is, again, taking the example of oil, that given that we did not have the reserves in the country, but we ended up refining so much oil, is there any way that we can build our capability in refining? Is there any way we can build up our capability in R&D, doing R&D, and finding alternatives? So if we find that maybe it's difficult to get hold of lithium, the alternatives are there. So investing in R&D and finding those alternatives. So, and of course, it has to be also linked with our industrial policy, as Dr. Kumar was mentioning, our industrial policy, our trade policy. We can be thinking about partnering. For example, the IPEF is one such global partnership with 13 countries, and they have a critical mineral focus as well. So, is that something that we can benefit from and partner there? And also, maybe sometimes, in some cases, bilateral FTAs might also help. Partnership, for example, with Australia, because we are looking at, we are importing a lot of minerals from them. So I think it has to be on for each mineral, the policy will be different. But then, unless we have a framework for all of this, and there would be actually, there could be conflicts, and we could end up, not achieving mineral security that we wanted.
Thank you. We have 5 more minutes, so I'm preempting your anger, and I'd request you for 10 more minutes of your time. Maybe go on to 5:10 if the organizers are okay with it. I'll have one more question for Dr. Kumar, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. Right? So we started late as well. So, Dr. Kumar, kind of wearing a technology policy hat, right? What should we do? Because you have all of these complexities, and you have such this dynamic space. But in the short term, say 5 to 10 years, what are the technology priorities, right? And how do we safeguard against some of these risks?
So let us take the example of lithium battery to understand that what need to be done in the short term and long term. So in India, if you see the lithium battery supply chain, we are importing the battery packs as well as the cell, and mainly we are doing the battery pack assembly. And now now government is pushing towards the backward integration of the supply chain, and trying to help in developing the domestic manufacturing of the cells in India. And then we are talking, the parallelly we are talking about the circularity. And there what happens that when we are talking about, unless we have the clear domestic manufacturing in India, especially the cell manufacturing and the active material manufacturing, it's become very difficult to assess the kind of raw material requirement will be there. Then parallelly, unless you have this active material manufacturing industry in India, you won't have the market for the recycled recycled materials from the lithium retired lithium battery. Currently, whatever we are small amount recycling this lithium battery and recovering this black mass, we are exporting this. So basically, we are losing on the raw material side. These are going outside, because as previous experts they mentioned that if you are planning to develop a mine, it takes time. So what you can do, you can focus on the circularity, increase the collection efficiency, increase the like recovery of this black battery grade material from the retired lithium battery, this black mass. And but once you recover this, you need a market for that. So unless you have active material manufacturing in India, active material manufacturing, cell manufacturing in India, it will be very difficult to have the market for the recycled materials. Similarly, in case of rare earth, so rare earth we are there in the upstream. We have the monazite in India, and but we are going up to the extraction and processing. But after that, we don't have the large scale capability for alloy manufacturing and the magnet manufacturing. So we need to identify these gaps in the supply chain, and we need to integrate this if we want to develop the sustainable supply chain for each one, whether it's the solar PV, lithium battery, or the rare earth magnet. So this gap needs to be filled.
No, thank you very much. That's a very specific kind of recommendation. So let me just, with that, open this up and for audience questions. I suppose we'll have time for certainly one round.
First of all, thank you for the detailed conversation on this. One question that I had, and thank you, Praveen, for focusing on this aspect on recycling. For if we say that recycling and urban mining reduces primary requirement as well as gives some economic value, and because we don't have technology for even manufacturing these rare earth elements, do we have technology for recycling these rare earths? For example, if we can say wind turbine, it has lot of rare earth magnets. Do we have the technology to recycle rare earth magnets and end of life? And if we don't, what can we do for this?
Fine. Abhinav?
Yeah. Yeah. Hi. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful inputs on critical mineral. So yeah, there has been, I mean, a lot of discussion around geopolitics of critical minerals, and also, I mean, in every panel, I hear this geopolitics, and this term is also very prominent: de-Chinafying the supplies. Uh, so. Uh, so I would like to know from the panel, how can India contribute to the responsibilization of the supply chains? And I mean, can India throw its weight as a leadership, as a leader of global South, and 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 makes these South partnerships to come out as a more responsible partner than China, uh, and like I mean, helping these countries come out of these extractive economy, uh, and developing certain primary or secondary uh, processing industry in those countries, or so can India portray itself as a responsible partner? So this is, I mean, one of the thing that I think. But what other things also can India do for responsibilization of the supply chains? And the second thing is, I mean, Dr. Chadda mentioned about ownership is an important factor. Ownership of mine is an important factor. So, how does it relate to the sovereignty over the minerals? I mean, is it conflicting, or how does it relate to uh, this thing? And thirdly, I mean, like Dr. Narula suggested, think tanks can do more on the ESG aspects. I would like to know what else, what kind of work think tanks can do around this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we have about four questions here between the two of you. The recycling technology question, who wants to take that? Praveen? Yeah.
So the recycling front, if we just take the example of lithium battery. So technology wise, we have the presence in the country. Several companies are there, even they are exploring the opportunity abroad. Only thing is there that they need to do the innovation in this existing technology, because if you want to make the economic sense of the recycling, for example, in India we have more lithium iron phosphate, and if you look into the material you get out of that recycling of LFP, only lithium is having the value in that, and then that makes the net recycling profit on the negative side. But if you use the direct recycling technology, which is at the development stage, that can ensure the profitability of that, and even the LFP recycling. So traditional recycling technologies are available. Only thing is there that how you increase the recycling efficiency, like collection efficiency, how you create the market for the recycled product, then only this industry will grow. And we need to do a lot on the policy and regulatory front. Standards are required, and then a lot of R&D support is required for the improvement on the technology side. As far as the wind turbines are concerned, recycling technologies are available. Only thing is there that what you will do after recycling those materials. You don't have the manufacturing. Either you have to just export those recovered raw material, and then the economic aspects comes into the picture. If something is not making economic sense, you're not that business is not doing, you're not making profitable, then that will not sustain. You can support with the incentive for some time, but long term support, it should sustain its own, and for that market is required. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you. For the responsibilization of supply chain, Professor Ray, can I turn to you for that? The responsibilization and the responsible partner aspect as well.
Okay, thanks. Um, being responsible in the supply chain, I mean, see, ultimately the question boils down to not the countries only, but also the companies who own the chains. And mostly these are large MNCs. So as a country, you may want to become responsible, or you want to push standards, and want to uphold certain things, but those companies may not share the same ethics or values. So it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, as a principle, it's a very good principle, but then it is quite difficult to implement. And certain countries have a better record in doing so, but a lot of countries actually face a lot of challenges in doing so.
Thank you. And the question about ownership and sovereignty, Dr. Chadda, can I turn to you for that?
Yeah, I think I have a comment on the supply chains that has been discussed. That how do we enter the supply chains? We thought that the Kabil, that is Khanij Videsh India Limited, would do a lot, take us forward into integrating with the supply chains. However, we have been observing that nothing much has been done, or it is yet to start. So one suggestion there, by the way, is that what has not been discussed, that the private companies, because the mining companies elsewhere want to deal B2B rather than G2G, so a lot of encouragement has to be given through Kabil's offices, that private companies start talking to each other. Secondly, I think the friend shoring and other issues have been discussed. There, I would suggest that we have platforms like Quad, which has not been discussed, and G20. Dr. Nirula, we work together. That B20, G20, that stockpiles can be built up. However, the question on the sovereignty and the ownership rights would depend from one country to another. For example, a country like Congo, where China has a huge control over the ownership of extraction, and then it has to be, if for Congo to make profit out of that, it has to be sent to China for processing. I think the conflict between the two will depend upon which country are we talking about. So Congo will be different from another country like Brazil, and Brazil would be different from another country like India, where the government would have a greater say. So I don't think that there is any resolution between the two, but obviously MNCs have a lot of power to wield in countries which are small African countries yet developing.
Thank you. Thank you. The last question, the role of think tanks. I'll turn to Dr. Nagotra and also Dr. Narula. So maybe a couple you can go first, and then I'll come to Namrata.
Thank you, Manu. Just a quick comment on the geopolitics and how India can take a leadership role. I think one good example is on the mineral security partnership. And out of the 13 countries, India is the only non-OECD country in that grouping. And it's a great endeavor. It was a last minute entry in the sense that it was a late entry to the critical minerals club, but better to be inside than outside. And just moving on to the role of think tanks, I think a lot of work can be driven on ESG, especially. We have a gap in development of standards, ESG standards. Think tanks can report on impact evaluation of what are the measures taken by certain companies who are actually on ground. Case studies and best practices can be reported. And a good example is this intergovernmental forum on mining minerals and metals based at IISD in Paris and Geneva. On this, we are also making some effort as high-level climate champions. We are partnering with Initiative for Responsible Mining, IRMA, on standards, and we are having this partnership with them, trying to evaluate SOE, a state-owned entity in Africa. And you'll hear some more about it at COP28. I'll stop here and hand over back to you.
You have the last word, Namrata.
Yes, I think pertinent question and also important question for us as researchers in terms of our own work at WRI India and how we want to take this forward. I think we also had a discussion at the ASEF where we had members from WRI Indonesia join us, and we realized that a lot of our own IOs are working in this domain. There's a lot of research that's going on. And I think as a part of WRI, this research is the first step. We've just broadly done the mapping. This is very preliminary. The idea that we want to take forward from here is to bring together all the research which is happening in a lot of our international offices, and to take all that information and then sort of integrate it into the norm building exercise and the building of the taxonomies and the nomenclature around critical minerals, which becomes very important from the point of view of developing countries. I don't think we have a lot to contribute in terms of the strategies of the geopolitics, but I think as think tanks and as academic institutions, this is where our contribution comes in, that we integrate all of that knowledge both forward and backward, and then sort of improve upon some of those taxonomies and nomenclatures to make sure that concerns of the developing countries and concerns of people at the ground level are integrated well within the whole political economy of critical minerals.
Great. Thank you. I won't summarize this session. It's 5:12. So my thanks to the panel, of course, for your time and your thoughts. A round of applause to them, please. And the audience as well. Thank you for your patience. right? So I think we can end with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. See you tomorrow.